the economy is coming to a halt. It's coming to a grinding halt. And if any economist that is worth their salt will tell you that in the time of a crisis, the worst thing that can happen is if you allow consumption spending in the economy to dry up. Families going out and buying their grocery and buying their fuel and buying their clothes at the shop and paying for the little bit of medication. If that dries up, you're not looking at an economy. That is the worst thing that can happen. When you have a section or increasingly more and more people in your population are not able to meet basic needs, that spells economic disaster of unimaginable proportion.
Much has been said and is being said about Guyana's current political crisis. However, there is another crisis that looms, an economic one. The Bank of Guyana recently released its report on the state of the economy ending March 31st, 2020. To give us an exact picture on what's happening with the economy based on the report, I spoke with Economist and Executive Director of the Guyana Budget and Policy Institute, Dhanraj Singh, who holds a Master's in Economics from the London School of Economics and is currently pursuing a degree in Constitutional Law and Legislative Draft. According to Singh, the economy is on the verge of collapse, and pointed to several findings from the Bank of Guyana report and other unsound economic policy decisions that led to the economy facing significant downfall.
Very evidently from the report is this. Let me ask a simple question. If your economy is doing so well in 5 years, how come the total assets for the country decreased in the billions over those 5 years? What I know for certain is that the decline that we have seen is $23 billion worth of foreign assets that we have lost under Granger administration alone.
So how did it happen?
And so that's the question. Well, I can tell you why that happened. When they closed Gaisuku and they realized that the foreign currency was not coming in, they had to figure a way how to get foreign currency. So how would you get it? The way you do that is you have to sell off the foreign assets that you have. So for example, gold bars, it's considered to be a foreign asset. Money that the government might have saved in the saving account and you invest in the US Treasury bills or a US bond, or you invest in the stock market or in the real estate. So if for some reason you have an economic shock, you can always say, okay, I'm going to liquidate some of the assets that I have here, cash in, take the money and use the money. So when you sell the foreign assets, that's the currency that you will take to use to keep in the domestic foreign currency market, just to keep the exchange rate.
The Bank of Guyana report also shows that Guyana is operating at a balance of trade deficit, importing more than it's exporting.
The balance of payment deficit that you're seeing clearly means we're buying more than we're exporting. The deficit continues to widen. The ideal position is always if you're spending $2 million to buy goods from outside, you're at least selling $2 million of your goods on the outside market. So the $2 million, the inflows of the foreign currency and the outflow sort of net itself off. You're not seeing that. You're seeing a widening of that deficit. That simply means we're exporting less relative to what we're importing. And that's a problem, because where are we going to get the foreign currency from to pay for the things that we want to buy? Because when you're buying from the US, you have to buy with US dollars. When you're buying from the rest of the world, you have to get US dollars. Where would you get it from?
But is the country broke? And can it go broke? Let's find out.
This person has 2 or 3 businesses, but all of these businesses are not doing very well. So let's say they have a textile company, and then they have a company producing steel. So he's taking money from the textile company to prop up the steel company, and then he's taking money from the steel company to prop up his beverage making company. That person is actually broke, right? Because they're taking from one company to fix the other and to fix. Is that the case in Guyana? Is Guyana really broke?
Technically speaking, no sovereign nation can go broke. Okay, technically speaking. Why? Because as a sovereign nation, you have the authority to print money. Because you can tomorrow just order the printing of $1 billion Guyana dollars and you have money to spend. Economically, in economic management, in a sense, yes, you can go broke, because printing of money is a problem. It leads to hyperinflation, inflation, and hyperinflation. The problem is, how much money do you have really to spend? That's where the problem lies. When the government took office in 2015, there was a public saving account with $23 billion of savings inside. As of March 31st of this year, the end of the first quarter, that account is in $83 billion deficit. That means the government spent out the $23 billion and then added a whole. They basically spent $83 billion more that they did not have, that they owe to the Bank of Guyana technically. And by the way, that is only the saving account that I'm talking about. The main account is called the Consolidated Fund. That Consolidated Fund account is probably in the excess of $100 billion in deficit. They stopped Granger administration actually stopped reporting the balance on that account a couple of years ago, about 2 to 3 years ago. So you have two accounts, your main one and a saving one. Your checking account is in $100 billion in deficit. Your saving account is in $83 billion in deficit. You owe the world about $300 billion in debt. The country is not, in a sense, broke because there are still assets on the books. Okay? But whether or not the government has money to spend is a different question, and that answer is no.
But what are some other factors that led the country to this current state of economic hardships?
So there was a list that is called the tax exemption list, and it had a lot of items on that list that was exempted from the tax. So prior to the Granger administration, families were not paying tax on electricity, for example. You are not paying VAT on electricity. You are not paying VAT on water, because these are considered to be basic necessities. When Granger administration took office, they rolled back some of those protections. They removed some items that were on the exemption list. They move it and put it on the tax list. So people starting to pay tax on electricity, people starting to pay tax on water. You probably might have heard the story in Mahaica where land leases were somewhere around $500 an acre or something for a year, whatever you lease the lands to farmers. Some of those rates increased from $500 to $5,000. So you imagine a small farmer who was renting 10 acres before and was paying $5,000 a year to lease that 10-acre land to plant some farm. When Granger changed, the administration came in and they changed the rate from $500 to $5,000. That same farmer now has to find $50,000 to pay for that same 10-acre land at the end of the year to lease it. All these simple things. A board certificate that used to be $500 or $300, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on that, but whatever that was, it went up to $7,000 for a copy of your own board certificate. So when you think about all the different fees that they rolled up in the thousands of percentage of increases, add that to the fact that people are having to pay taxes now on some items that they were simply using in their kitchen. It adds up. It adds up, especially for those persons who are making a minimum wage or they're living below the poverty line.
At this point, Singh believes that a lot of families are depending heavily on remittances for basic needs. Remittances are estimated around 40 billion Guyana dollars a year.
In normal times, remittances does be about 14% of the economy. Of that 14%, about 8% does be directly from families to family. That remittances that goes to family, half of all of that money, people spend it on food and clothing. That's basic necessities. So that just shows the importance of the important role that remittances play in helping families and households meet basic needs in Guyana. Now, with the pandemic and with the global economy is going to go into a recession, the majority of the diaspora, which is in New York and Canada, will also be taking a hit because of the job situation in these countries and the pandemic. Naturally, remittances will tank. When remittances tank, not only are these monies not going to be going into Guyana economy to help the economy, it is going to families that depended on these kinds of support would simply have nowhere else to turn. They will literally have to do without a meal, do without clothing. Some of them are already doing without needed health care that they need. Surgeries people having to put off because they simply can't afford it.
The report also shows that families and businesses are unable to pay their mortgages as there is a notable increase in non-performing loans.
In the case of the Bank of Guyana report, for example, you will see one of the things that is highlighted. In 2015, when you check the percentage of people, households, and businesses, everybody that borrowed took a loan from the banking system. The percentage of people who are not able to pay their loan, pay their interest, and make their mortgage payment, their loan payments, you call it non-performing loans. It means these loans are not performing. People are not servicing them. People are not making their payments. So back in 2015, that percentage was somewhere around 6 or 7%. At the end of the the first quarter of this year, that percentage is at 10.1%. What does that tell you? That tells you that more and more people and businesses are not able to repay their loans. Why? Because they're not making revenues. Why? Because the economy is not doing well.
So the question now is, how will Guyana pull itself out of this current state, and what does that road to recovery look like?
First and most important thing that has to happen to prevent an economic collapse is that you need a legitimate government in place. Literally, that's the first thing. There is nothing that can happen outside of that. Why? Granger can't go to parliament and have a budget passed. There is no parliament. A legitimate government must take office before we can prevent an economic collapse. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they will have to hit the ground and run into what is called sort of crisis mode. And that literally means immediately pass a stimulus package and pump monies in the hands of families and give them to spend immediately. That's one. Two, you're then going to have to immediately sort of simultaneously, while you're thinking about that and you finish that, you have to keep thinking about a national budget. Because remember, without a national budget, there's no money to spend. And in this moment, the government ought to be the one to spend. They have to save the economy. And if that means taking on more debt to finance the spendings, then you have to do that, because this debt that you're going to take on is really an investment in the people. And you're going to see that. I would be doing my Guyanese brothers and sisters a disservice if I sit here and pretend like there is roses and peaches there and all of this is just fabrication. I am professionally ethical when it comes to my work, and nothing that I've said here to you tonight, I don't have the numbers to back it up on, or good enough reasons to tell you why I said what I said.
For the Guyanese Diaspora News, I'm Jennifer Jabbar.